body's constitutional authority on matters of war and peace. Because let's be perfectly clear, only Congress has the power to declare war. The Trump administration's military escalation in the Caribbean is not only reckless, it is blatantly illegal. We cannot allow this kind of dangerous overreach to go unchecked. Trump, a president who touts himself as a global peacemaker, has appointed himself as judge, jury, and executioner in the Western Hemisphere. This brutal military campaign, which has killed more than 90 people, further threatens a region that has already been destabilized by decades of U.S. intervention. And it risks driving us into further war in Venezuela. The American people across the political spectrum have been clear that they do not want to fight and fund another war. With this vote, every member of Congress has the chance to show the American people where they stand. Will they enable Trump's illegal lawmaking, or will they stand on the side of the Constitution?
30 more seconds.
Stand on the side of the Constitution and put an end to this unauthorized use of military force. I urge all of my colleagues to uphold the separation of powers and pass this resolution. I yield back.
The Department of Defense repatriated 2 survivors to their home countries rather than prosecuting them in the United States courts, as we would expect if these individuals were, in fact, dangerous drug traffickers bound for the United States. Fact of the matter is, a number of the individuals that he talked about, if they were in the United States, they would have been tried in our courts. That decision raises serious questions about the administration's own assessment of threat, necessity, and purpose. These strikes have not been authorized by Congress, and the administration has not sought congressional authorization to use lethal military force to address alleged criminal activity that, under the United States law, and we are a country of laws, does not carry the death penalty. That is a profound escalation, and one Congress has neither debated nor approved. They openly convert and covet Venezuelan oil. That's what this is about. The president is coveting Venezuelan oil. And despite promises to end wars, this president is threatening military invasions, not just in Venezuela, but across the Western Hemisphere. Just last night, President Trump declared, and I quote, "Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America, and that the shock will be nothing like they have ever seen." This is not a strategy. This is a game. And the president is playing it with the lives of American service members, threatening a regime change war with no plan for what would happen next. This president wants to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. But this Congress is not a part of the executive branch. We are a co-equal branch of government. And the Constitution vests this body with authority over matters of war and peace. That power has too often been ceded to the executive branch. Earlier this month, on a bipartisan and bicameral basis, we repealed outdated authorizations for use of military force to prevent presidents of either party from abusing it. We cannot now abandon our constitutional duty over these strikes in the Western Hemisphere. Even if you happen to disagree with me when I say these strikes, and they are, not about making Americans safer, that these strikes are about oil, that they are about another reckless foreign war, or stretching presidential power toward that of a would-be king. All of those things happen to be true, by the way. This vote is ultimately not about whether you agree with the administration's policy. It's not about whether any president can take these actions. No, it is about, and what it should be about, is whether this president can take these actions without congressional approval. And every member of Congress should want to do their job. Congress must make clear, all of us, that no president can unilaterally draw the United States into a conflict the American people do not want. Democrats.
Just in the last year in his district, he's lost at least 140 people to overdose, which apparently he does not want to protect his community from those like the president wants to protect his community. I now yield 4 minutes to the chairwoman of the Western Hemisphere, Ms. Salazar of Florida.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you. I am here today because I oppose this resolution. It is fundamentally flawed. It is trying to invoke the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which doesn't even apply in the case of Venezuela. The War Powers Resolution applies when there is an active combat with the United States forces. It does not include law enforcement or counter-narcotics operations against declared terrorists like Nicolás Maduro, who happens to be the head of a major drug cartel in the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, we do not need this resolution because what the president is doing is well within the law. The president does not need congressional approval to protect Americans from terrorist attacks. Let's see what the Constitution says. The Founding Fathers vested in Congress the power to declare a war, but they were equally clear that the power to defend the homeland from foreign and domestic threats belongs to the president as commander-in-chief. Therefore, President Trump does not need congressional permission to kill terrorists at sea who are bringing cocaine and fentanyl to the streets of Miami, New York, or Chicago. Let's see what international law says. The United States is waging a non-international armed conflict with Venezuela. What does that mean? Our issue is not with Venezuela as a country, but with Nicolás Maduro, the narco-trafficker who hijacked that country after he stole the elections last year. Under the law of armed conflict, we can use military force to stop his drug cartel from flooding the streets of the United States. According to Article 29 of the Charter of the Organization of American States, which the United States is a member, says that the countries of the Western Hemisphere may take military action against a threat that endangers the peace of the Americas. The Maduro regime has destroyed the peace of the whole Western Hemisphere, if not ask anyone that lives in my district, the city of Miami. Now let's go back to American history, which says that Maduro is the world's largest drug trafficker. In 2020, he was indicted by a federal grand jury in this country for pushing hundreds of thousands of tons of cocaine to the streets of the United States. Back in 1989, we had a very similar experience in Panama with Manuel Noriega. President Bush at the time took action in Panama to remove Noriega. There was no need for congressional approval. But as commander-in-chief, he did what he needed to do. Today, Panamanians are eternally grateful to the United States. Or in 1983, President Ronald Reagan ordered United States forces into the island of Grenada to protect the lives of American citizens. Once again, the president did not ask approval from Congress. Reagan acted swiftly, lawfully, and decisively. Today, the actions taken against the Cartel de los Soles, headed by Maduro, fall squarely into this same category. Operations against non-state actors and criminal organizations, not a war against a sovereign nation or a legitimate president. This resolution presented by the Democratic Party would tie President Trump's hands into the fight against drug trafficking terrorists. Every Venezuelan knows that Maduro is just a thug and a delinquent who has been in the drug trafficking business for 27 years since he took over the country. They have totally destroyed the most prosperous country in Latin America, Venezuela. Of course, Congress has a crucial role in authorizing wars, but the president has independent authority to defend the mainland. Panama is thriving, Grenada is thriving. once Maduro is gone and order is restored to the country, it will be the most prosperous country in Latin America, having the largest reserves of oil in the world, which will give them enough resources not to depend on the charity of the United States or any other country to fix the destruction Maduro wrought. For those reasons, I strongly oppose this resolution, and I urge my colleagues to do the same.
He had the same passion to speak out against the Trump administration's mass deportation of Venezuelans legally in the United States of America. And Mr. Chairman, if this truly was about addressing drugs, then tell me why the administration pardoned Russ Ulbricht, who ran one of the largest online drug marketplaces in history, and was serving a double life sentence. Why did the president pardon the former president of Honduras, whom a U.S. court convicted and sentenced for flooding the U.S. with 400 tons of cocaine, and bragged? He said, shoved the drugs right up the noses of the gringos. Pardoned by the president of the United States into your district and my district. I'm a former special narcotics prosecutor, and I know this to be a fact. You don't run a serious counter-narcotics strategy by carrying out the death penalty for those who are on the bottom of the drug trade, while freeing those who are very at the top and ordering them to come. And at the same time, the administration asks us to believe that deploying fighter jets, an aircraft carrier, and more than 15,000 troops to the Caribbean is merely a counter-drug mission. This is the largest U.S. military buildup in the region since the Cuban Missile Crisis. If this was really about drugs, why are the United States forces seizing oil tankers? The stated mission, the scale of the buildup, and the actions taken simply do not align. The administration can't keep its story straight, and it is no longer trying to hide its real motivations. Senior officials, including the president himself, have made it clear that the real objective is provoking a conflict with Venezuela to oust Maduro. Trump's chief of staff said to Vanity Fair, quote, he wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Himes.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I came down here to debate something that this chamber has been debating for generations, which is the push and pull between the Congress and the executive on the use of our military. I was profoundly disturbed to hear the chairman denigrate the ranking member, to suggest that he doesn't care about the losses in his district, to suggest that we want the president to do nothing about narcotics. He knows that that is not true. I will tell the chairman that I have opposed every presidential attempt to use the American armed forces without congressional approval since I have been here. But this is about one thing, and it's not about the comity of this institution or the dignity that the majority should show in such a debate. This is about one thing and one thing only. It's not about the horrors of drug abuse. We know that over here. There's not a Democrat who doesn't believe that 100,000 overdoses is an appalling outcome. There's not a Democrat here who doesn't experience the crushing, disgusting horror of those losses. We couldn't agree with the majority more that this is a huge problem. But what this is about is whether the representatives of the people should be involved in a discussion about how we solve this problem. The Constitution says so. The questions raised here, for the first time in 250 years, the United States military is deliberately targeting civilians. They may be awful civilians, I'll grant you that, but they are deliberately targeting civilians. We have the largest military force ever assembled in the Caribbean. No discussion, no debate in this chamber amongst the representatives of the people. The administration has created a war that is not a war, a non-international armed conflict. It is a war inasmuch as we have an aircraft carrier and massive amounts of military hardware in the region, and we've killed upwards of 100 people in 23, 24 strikes. But it's not a war that needs to be informed even to the Congress. So the only question that matters, and you can show all the pictures of decapitations and of horror and of overdoses, and we'll stand with you in 100% about how horrible that is. But you know what else is horrible? That the majority is comfortable with the removal of the representatives of the people on this most consequential of issues. Let's agree that there will be a Democratic president someday who does something that the majority doesn't agree with. But every word they say here today will unbind the hands of that Democratic president to do whatever he or she wants. This is about our privileges as the representatives of the people. This is about our fidelity to the Constitution of the United States that demands us to have this debate. So let's stop trying to scare the American people, and for the first time in a very long time, let's stand up with the dignity and the decency that this topic deserves and debate how we are going to address this huge problem while preserving our privileges and prerogatives as representatives of all of the American people.